Be decent life without conditions. Have you ever been kind to someone, and later regretted it? You offered your help. You gave your time. Maybe even a piece of your heart, but they ignored it. Took advantage of it, or worse, they hurt you in return, and so you tell yourself, next time, I won't be so soft, next time, I'll protect myself. Kindness is a weakness, but is it really? Let me tell you a story. There was once a young man in the city who worked 2 jobs just to make ends meet. Every morning, he stopped by a bakery and bought 2 loaves of bread, one for himself, and one for a homeless man who sat outside the train station. The homeless man never said thank you. Never smiled. Sometimes he even looked annoyed, but the young man kept bringing the bread, every single day. Rain or shine, his friends mocked him. Why do you keep giving to someone who clearly doesn't care? That guy doesn't deserve your kindness. And he would simply shrug and say, because I want to. One cold winter, the young man collapsed at the station from exhaustion. People passed by. Dozens. Hundreds. But guess who rushed to help? The homeless man. He called for help. Stayed with him until the ambulance came, and when the young man woke up in the hospital, the man was there. With a loaf of bread, sometimes, we plant seeds that grow in silence, and the kindness we give today may return to us, in the most unexpected ways. But here's the real question, what if it didn't? What if that man never brought the bread? What if no one ever said thank you? Would your kindness still matter? In this world, we've been taught to measure everything, effort versus reward, goodness versus gratitude, love versus return. But what if we lived differently? What if kindness was not a transaction, but a reflection of who we truly are? This is not about being a doormat, it's not about letting people walk all over you, it's about something deeper. Something ancient. Something powerful. In Buddhism, there's a kind of strength that doesn't need to shout, a kind of power that doesn't seek attention, a kind of kindness that asks for nothing in return. It's called unconditional decency. And it might just be the most radical way of living in a world full of conditions. In this video, we're going to explore why most people misunderstand what true kindness is. What psychology and Buddhism both reveal about giving without expectation. Real stories of people who chose goodness, even when it hurt, and how you can practice this rare kind of strength in your everyday life. Because the truth is, kindness isn't weakness, it's wisdom, and maybe, just maybe, the ones who are kind without conditions, are the freest people of all. Let's begin. Let's be honest, most people are kind, when it's convenient, when it feels good, when they know it'll come back to them someday. We like to say, be kind, because it's the right thing to do. But in the shadows of our hearts, a quiet voice asks, what's in it for me? Conditional kindness, it's the kind of kindness that's polite on the surface, but calculated underneath. We hold the door for someone, and expect a thank you. We give a gift, and expect to be appreciated. We help a friend, and feel hurt when they don't return the favor. It's like we've turned compassion into currency, a quiet trade deal of the heart. But here's the catch, when kindness becomes a transaction, it loses its soul, it becomes a business of the ego, not a gift from the spirit. Let me tell you a true story. In a small town, there was a high school teacher named Ms. Thompson. She was beloved by everyone, always patient, always encouraging. One day, she stayed late after school to help a struggling student. That student never thanked her. In fact, he dropped out a few weeks later. No note. No goodbye. Ms. Thompson was heartbroken. She began questioning all her years of dedication. Was it even worth it? She whispered one night in the empty classroom. Years passed. Then, one morning, she received a letter. It was from that same student, now a successful psychologist. He wrote, "You're the reason I turned my life around. I just wasn't ready to say it back then." Not every kindness is acknowledged. Not every seed shows signs of life right away. But here's the deeper truth. If your goodness is waiting for applause, then it was never truly goodness to begin with. In Buddhism, there's a term, upadana. It means clinging, attachment. Most of us are not attached to giving, we're attached to the result of giving. We're not attached to being kind, we're attached to being seen as kind. We give, but only to those who deserve it. We forgive, but only if the other person says sorry first. We love, but only when it feels safe. This isn't love, this isn't compassion, this is ego, dressed up in the robes of virtue. But what if you let go? What if you were kind without expecting anything, not even a smile? Would that make you weaker, or unimaginably strong? In the Dhammapada, the Buddha says, "Let a man remove his anger. Let him root out pride. Let him overcome all bondage. No sorrow befalls him who is free from attachment." Imagine how free you would be if your actions were no longer bound by approval, if you gave, because your heart is full, not because it's empty and looking to be filled, if you were decent, not because people deserve it, but because that's who you are. In a world that teaches us to be nice for the sake of reward, unconditional kindness is rebellion, it's power, it's liberation. Once, in the forests of ancient India, there lived a man whose name sparked fear in every village, Angulimala. His name meant necklace of fingers, and for a horrifying reason. He was a killer, a man so feared that even soldiers wouldn't walk the roads he haunted. He wore the fingers of his victims as a gruesome necklace, a trophy of his rage, his pain, his madness. But what turned this man into a murderer was not evil. It was betrayal. Before he became Angulimala, he was ahimsaka, which means the harmless one. A bright, compassionate student in a monastery, studying under a jealous teacher. That teacher, threatened by ahimsaka's talent and grace, began a slow, dark manipulation. He whispered lies, twisted truth, poisoned his heart with doubt, until one day ahimsaka snapped, and once he crossed the line of violence, anger became his prison, hatred, his master. He ran into the forest and began to kill. The people cursed his name, the king put a bounty on his head, even his own mother feared for her life. But there was one person who walked straight toward him, calm, barefoot, alone, the Buddha. As the Buddha approached, Angulimala raised his weapon, ready to strike. But something strange happened. The Buddha didn't run, he didn't plead, he didn't even flinch. He simply said, "I have stopped, Angulimala, when will you stop?" Those words hit deeper than any blade ever could. In that moment, something cracked inside Angulimala, not fear, not guilt, but awakening. He dropped his sword, he fell to his knees, and he asked the Buddha, "Is there redemption for someone like me?" The Buddha looked into his eyes and answered, "No one is beyond transformation. Not even you." And so the murderer became a monk. He shaved his head, donned robes, and lived the rest of his life in service, silence, and meditation. The villagers never forgave him. They threw stones, spat at him, cursed him as he begged for alms. But Angulimala never retaliated. He endured it all, with peace in his heart, because he understood something most people never will. Being decent isn't about who deserves it, it's about who you choose to be. This is the heart of Buddhist wisdom. You don't show kindness only when it's safe, you show it when it's right, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it goes against the crowd, even when the world tells you someone is not worth it. Because your decency does not depend on their worth. It depends on your freedom. The Buddha didn't see a killer, he saw suffering, and instead of punishing it, he embraced it, not to excuse the violence, but to break the cycle of it. Here's the truth, people hurt others because they are hurting inside, people reject kindness because they don't believe they deserve it, people run from love because they've only known pain. But one act of true, unconditional decency can stop the cycle. Just like it did for Angulimala. So next time you feel someone doesn't deserve your kindness, remember this: no one is too far gone, and you are never too small to be the one who chooses peace. Some people believe Buddhism is only for monks, that compassion is something reserved for temples or silent meditation halls, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Buddhism was never meant to be locked away, it's meant to be lived, right here, in the messiness of daily life. Let me tell you some stories, real people, real struggles, radical kindness. Story 1, The Homeless Man and the Muffin. It was a cold morning in New York City. Sarah, a young woman rushing to work, stopped by a cafe for her usual, a muffin and a coffee. as she left, she saw a homeless man sitting against the wall, shivering, holding a torn sign, "Anything helps." She hesitated, then did what most of us have done before. She looked away, but just a few steps later. She paused, she turned around, and she walked back. "Would you like my muffin?" she asked. The man looked at her, his eyes filled with tears. He said, "You're the first person who's spoken to me in 3 days." Sarah didn't post it on social media, she didn't write about it in a blog, she just did it, because true kindness doesn't need an audience, it just needs courage, and in that small act, a man who felt invisible, was reminded he was still human. In the Metta Sutta, the Buddha teaches, even as a mother protects with her life her child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Story 2, The Angry Customer. At a small diner in Ohio, a waitress named Jamie was having a tough day, double shift. Low tips. Sore feet. Then, the man at table 4 exploded, "My eggs are cold." "What kind of service is this?" he yelled. Slammed his hand on the table, the whole diner went quiet. Jamie could have yelled back, she could have walked away, instead. She did something no one expected. She brought him a fresh plate, placed it gently in front of him, and softly said, "I'm sorry you're having a hard morning. I hope this helps even just a little." The man didn't know what to say, he stared at her, mouth open, then, he started to cry. "I just lost my wife," he said. "I didn't know where else to put the pain." That day, Jamie didn't just serve breakfast, she served compassion, to a heart that was breaking, and she reminded us all, sometimes the ones who deserve kindness the least, need it the most. Buddhist compassion isn't about making yourself a doormat, it's not about ignoring harm or being naive, it's about this, seeing beyond the mask of anger, and reaching for the suffering beneath it. Story 3, The Forgotten Father. Ben hadn't spoken to his father in 14 years, there'd been harsh words, betrayals, deep wounds, the kind that feel permanent. But one evening, while scrolling on Facebook, Ben saw a post, "My dad passed away today. I wish I had called him one last time." He stared at that post for minutes, then picked up the phone, and called the man he once promised he'd never speak to again. There was silence, then a tremble, then a whisper on the other side, "I've been waiting for this call every day." Ben didn't call because his father deserved it, he called because he was ready to stop carrying hate, and that is the beginning of freedom. In the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha says, "Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love, this is the eternal law." These are just a few stories, they don't involve celebrities, they don't go viral, but they change lives, they show us that radical kindness, the kind that isn't logical, or fair, or earned, is the kind that heals deepest, because the truth is, you don't have to be a monk to practice Buddhism, you just have to be present, you just have to choose love, when the world tells you to look away. Let's take a moment and pause, think about the last time you were kind to someone, without expecting anything in return. Can you remember how it felt, that feeling of warmth, of joy, not because you got something, but because you gave? It's no coincidence. In Buddhism, we believe that when we practice compassion, truly selfless kindness, it's not just the other person who benefits, we are healed, we are transformed. But why is that? Let's take a step into the brain for a moment. When you do something kind, your brain releases oxytocin, the hormone often called the love hormone. Oxytocin has been shown to increase feelings of happiness, trust, and connection. It's the same chemical that's released when you hug someone or feel close to a loved one, but here's the twist, it doesn't just make you feel good, it lowers your stress levels and improves your overall health. In one study, researchers found that when people did something kind for another, even something as small as holding the door open, their heart rate slowed, their blood pressure dropped, and their mood improved. This is because kindness triggers the parasympathetic nervous system, the part of the body that calms us down. So, when you are kind to others, you are actually doing a favor for your own well-being. Your brain releases feel-good chemicals, your heart opens, and your spirit finds peace. But there's more to it than just biology. In Buddhism, we see kindness as a powerful form of practice, a way to train the heart and mind. Buddhist teachings speak about bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. It's the deep, unshakable wish to relieve suffering in all beings. When we act with this intention, with pure compassion, we begin to align ourselves with something greater than the self. The Buddha teaches that all suffering arises from attachment to self, to desires, to outcomes, but when you practice kindness without expecting anything in return, you begin to detach from the ego, you begin to break down the boundaries between self and other. The Dalai Lama often says, when we practice patience, we benefit from the peace that comes with it. When we practice kindness, we benefit from the joy that it brings. This is the paradox of unconditional kindness: the more you give, the more you receive, but not in the way you expect. You may not get a thank you from the world, you may not see the change immediately, but deep inside, there's a quiet transformation happening. The more you give without conditions, the more your heart opens, and the more your mind finds freedom. True freedom, according to the Buddha, is the end of attachment, the end of holding on to expectations, fears, and grudges. When you give without conditions, you let go of the need for approval, recognition, or reward. You free yourself from the prison of the ego. One of the most profound teachings in Buddhism is about the nature of suffering. That suffering arises when we hold on to things, whether it's a grudge, a desire, or even a need to be praised. When you practice kindness without expecting anything in return, you are freeing yourself from that attachment. And here's the most beautiful part: the more you give, the more peace you feel. It's a peace that doesn't depend on your circumstances. It's a peace that doesn't depend on anyone else's actions. This is what we call equanimity, a state of calm, balance, and inner peace that arises naturally when we stop clinging to outcomes. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha says, hatred is never defeated by hatred, only by love is hatred conquered. And what is love? It's kindness, without condition, it's compassion, without attachment, it's understanding that everyone, including yourself, is simply doing the best they can in this world. So, the next time you wonder, why should I be kind to someone who doesn't deserve it? Ask yourself this: what is it that I truly want, a world full of hate, or a world full of peace, compassion, and joy? Because when you practice kindness with no strings attached, you are not just changing the world around you, you are changing yourself. We often think that kindness is all about doing something, saying something, acting in ways that are visible, tangible, but sometimes the most powerful form of kindness isn't in what you do, or what you say, it's in what you don't do, and what you don't say. It's in the moments of silence. In Buddhism, silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's the presence of wisdom. It's the space where clarity is born, where understanding deepens, where compassion is allowed to unfold. Have you ever been with someone in a difficult moment, when words felt pointless? When everything that could be said seemed empty, insufficient, or even trivial? There's a Buddhist teaching called right speech, which is part of the Eightfold Path. It teaches that speech should be true, kind, beneficial, given at the right time. But sometimes, the right time is when you remain silent. Think about this: how often do we fill the space with words, just to fill the space? How often do we speak when it would be wiser to remain silent? How many times have you said something, and immediately regretted it? In moments of grief, pain, or deep frustration, there's often a longing for understanding. But understanding doesn't always come from talking. Sometimes, it comes from just being there, from holding space. In a world where everyone has something to say, truly listening, without the need to respond, is an act of profound kindness. When you listen deeply, without judgment, you create a space for the other person to feel seen and heard. Sometimes, that's all they need: not advice, not solutions, just presence. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha says, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. This doesn't mean silence is always the answer, but it does mean that sometimes, the most powerful words we can speak are the ones we leave unsaid. Silence isn't passive, it isn't empty, it's active, it's full of intention, it's full of wisdom. When you choose silence, you're making space for clarity, you're giving your heart and mind the chance to align, you're allowing the wisdom of the moment to arise without interference. And this can be a profound gift, not just for others, but for yourself. Think about the last time you were frustrated, angry, or upset. What did you want most? To be heard, to make your point. What if, instead of reacting, you paused? What if you allowed the moment to breathe? In that space, you might find that your anger fades, your frustration dissolves, and your heart becomes open to understanding. This is the power of silence. It's the power to create a space for self-reflection, for compassion, and for healing. Silence allows us to hear what we often ignore, the quiet voice of wisdom within. We are often too busy, too distracted, to hear our own thoughts, our own needs, and desires. In the rush of everyday life, it's easy to drown out the subtle whispers of our heart. But when we practice silence, even for a few moments a day, we begin to listen to that inner voice. And when we listen, we hear what we truly need, what we truly desire, and often, what we truly desire is not more things, but more peace. Silence isn't just about being quiet on the outside, it's about creating inner stillness. It's about stopping the endless chatter of the mind, and allowing yourself to rest in the present moment. And in that stillness, you'll find wisdom, you'll find clarity, you'll find compassion, and you'll find the freedom to simply be. The next time you're in a difficult conversation, ask yourself, what's more important, being right or being kind? If being kind is more important, then perhaps, the best thing you can do is simply listen, and sometimes, the most kind and compassionate thing you can do is to say nothing at all. As we come to the final chapter of this journey, let's ask ourselves, what does it really mean to live with purpose? Is it about achieving goals? Is it about success, recognition, or material gain? Or is there something deeper, something more profound, that truly gives our life meaning? Living with intention is the art of aligning your actions with your deepest values. It's about choosing every day, with purpose and clarity, to be the person you want to be. It's about embracing kindness as not just a momentary act, but as a way of life. Imagine waking up each day with a clear sense of purpose, not because someone told you what to do, but because you know, deep inside, that you are living true to your heart. Living with intention doesn't mean that you have everything figured out. It means that, in each moment, you choose to act with mindfulness, with compassion, and with a heart full of wisdom. In the Buddhist tradition, the concept of right action is central to the Eightfold Path. It's about acting in ways that are aligned with your deepest values, ways that bring peace to both yourself and others. And living with intention is the cornerstone of right action. It's not about being perfect, it's about being mindful, aware, and present in every decision. When you live with intention, you realize that every choice you make, from how you speak, to how you act, to how you treat the people around you, has a ripple effect. Your actions create change in the world, but they also create change within yourself. Each act of kindness, each moment of patience, each instance of compassion, they transform you. Living with intention doesn't always lead to instant rewards. In fact, often, the most meaningful changes happen in ways you can't see immediately. But the truth is this, living with purpose means focusing on the long term, not just the short term. It's about choosing actions that will cultivate peace, love, and understanding in the world. Not because you expect something in return, but because you believe in the value of those actions. The Buddha taught us that life is impermanent, everything we experience is temporary, our relationships, our possessions, our own lives, but the impact we make through our actions, through our kindness, is what truly lasts. This is why living with intention is so powerful, because when you choose to act with kindness, when you choose to live in alignment with your highest values, you are creating a legacy that transcends time. Living with intention isn't just about thinking about it, it's about practicing it every day. It's about becoming the person you want to be, one action at a time. Every day, you have the opportunity to ask yourself, how can I live with purpose today? And every day, you have the choice to answer that question, not with grand gestures or complicated plans, but with simple acts of love, patience, and understanding. You can choose to be kind to others. You can choose to be kind to yourself. You can choose to act with wisdom and compassion in every moment. Living with intention doesn't mean you won't face difficulties, or that you won't experience pain and suffering. But it means that when those things arise, you have a sense of clarity and purpose to navigate through them. you are no longer tossed around by life's ups and downs, but are grounded in a sense of meaning, a meaning that comes from the practice of living kindly, living wisely, and living with intention. And here's the beauty of it: when you live with intention, your kindness becomes contagious, it spreads to others, and before you know it, you've created a world that reflects your values. Your intentional actions inspire others to live with purpose, too, and in that way, a single act of kindness can ripple out into 1,000, transforming the lives of people you'll never even meet. So, as we conclude this journey together, I invite you to reflect on the life you are creating. Are you living with intention? Are you acting with kindness? Not because it's easy, but because it's true to who you are, because, when you live with intention, you are not just changing the world. You are changing yourself, transforming into someone who is more loving, more compassionate, and more aligned with the wisdom of the universe. Thank you for joining me on this journey. May you live with purpose, may you live with kindness, and may you live with intention. This is the end of our journey together, but it's only the beginning of the life you are about to create, a life that is full of meaning, love, and unconditional kindness. If you found value in this video, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notifications for more insights on living a mindful and purposeful life. Thank you for being here. I'm Zen Buddhism Wisdom, and I'll see you next time.